Welcome to the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast, powered by Chore. Each week, we bring extremely valuable accounting and tax tips specific to small business owners. You will be on your way to growing your business and putting more money in your pockets. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Mike Jesowshek, and today we have a special guest on. We have Chris Hanna on, and we're going to be talking about how to manage money when you're making a lot, but not very often. And so Chris has some awesome things to talk about. I thought he would be a great guest for the podcast. So Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be on, excited to talk about this topic.
Excellent. So I guess just to kind of start to give the audience a little background, give the audience a little bit of your story. I know when I first met you and learning about kind of where you came from, it was definitely a unique and cool story. So I think that's something that would be helpful to share with the audience as we lead into some of the things we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. So as far as how I got started with entrepreneurship and what I'm doing now, I guess when I was real young, I just wanted my independence, and that desire never really stopped all the way up, until the time I graduated high school. And then throughout college, I was still really just wanting my independence. And so when it came time to decide what I was going to do after school, I had a job offer for a job on Wall Street. And I also at that time was learning how to count cards and play blackjack professionally, which we can get into the difference between those two because they're actually not one and the same. Counting cards and professional blackjack are different. But at that time, I just wanting my independence, I said, you know what? I think that I can really make some money doing this. I had a roommate who was also really good with numbers, and we had some money and we thought that we could actually make enough to get started in life. And so I told my parents that, hey, I got this job offer and I sort of want to include you in the conversation, but at the same time, I feel pretty certain that this is what I want to do after school. So yeah, I got started playing blackjack. We within days after we graduated, we started driving to all the local casinos. We made our way out to Vegas not too long after that, stayed there for a month. And we did that for a while until we ultimately had to switch some things up. We weren't able to draw enough. We didn't have a big enough investment to draw from it substantially to actually live on. And that just sort of continued. It got me to continue thinking about more alternative ways to make money. So I got a bunch of these gig jobs. I found myself really just with my hands up in the air when it came to my personal finances, which was really frustrating for me because I had this formal background in finance and I had this training on Wall Street, and I was studying for the CFA. I had all these different sort of financial accolades, and I felt totally lost when it came to my personal finances. And in reflecting on that, I just kind of made a commitment to myself that I was going to dive deeper into it, really learn what it took to manage my money well. And that through sort of learning and experimenting on my own, eventually realized that this is not only something that is not taught in school or even in college with a finance degree. And so I realized I had created and built a skill that I could really help other people with.
Excellent. Now that's a fascinating story, and I love playing blackjack, so I'm curious.
Oh, cool.
The whole counting cards thing.
Yeah,
I've never been that advanced to it. I mean, I just play it casually when we're in a situation that allows for it. But yeah, that's crazy. I'm good to know that a career in that maybe is not the most secure option for me. So
yeah, no, it's not, and it's really not. So the way to think about it, at least from a mathematical standpoint, is if you're counting cards correctly and playing blackjack correctly. So there's these different skills that go into professional blackjack play. Counting cards is just one of them. So as you count cards, you also have to know how much to bet. So you have to manage a bankroll. And as the count changes, so does your bet, because the count really tells you the percent, the house advantage at any given time that either you have or the house has. And if you're playing correctly, playing your basic strategy, there are a bunch of different variations from basic strategy that you play based on the count. You have to estimate how many cards have already been played, so you know how many cards are left, so you can divide that by the count and find your true count. So all these different skills, ultimately, you do all that correctly, you do all these mental gymnastics, and eventually you can maybe earn 1% of everything that you wager. And so to put that into perspective, let's say you're betting, let's say an average of $100 per hand times 100 hands per hour. You're looking at maybe, what is that? What is that? $100 per hour? I don't know if my math's right there, actually. But over the long run, it actually is not significant unless you have a substantial amount of money. And even then, the eyes in the sky, like they're just hawk-eyed looking at you. So no, it's not an ideal career path. There are much better ways to make money. It's fun. It was fun nevertheless, but yeah, there's much better ways.
Well, that's good to know. I guess I'll just stick to drinking a beer and playing by the book when I play blackjack. Just for fun. Cool. So let's kind of get started into a little bit about some of the things that you've seen now that you have focused on this side. So, this is a podcast about tax savings, tax strategies, and things like that. And so when you're working with entrepreneurs, what is kind of some of the mistakes, or what the biggest mistake that you see them make when it comes to the taxes piece? Yeah. So when I realized that I had this skill in managing money that was a little bit different than sort of classic financial teachings, and I said, I want to help other people manage their money. I want to be a financial coach. I wanted to start very niched down, and I had been a big fan of the UFC and also practiced and trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for several years, for a couple years very seriously. And so as I decided I wanted to start working with UFC fighters as my sort of initial niche. Before I even started working with them, though, I just had conducted these informational interviews and found out that a lot of these fighters, and this is the same for anyone who is just not used to earning substantial money on an inconsistent basis, they often treat their tax bill as something that just comes up every March or April, of the following year. And they're completely neglecting any thought about taxes up until that very point. It's almost like taxes for me don't exist until I actually file my, or speak to my accountant at the end of the year. And all of a sudden now you've got a massive tax bill that just has to come out of your savings account or your emergency fund. So one of the biggest mistakes is just simply neglecting even thinking about taxes. And on a more practical basis, it's not proactively putting money aside as you earn it into a separate savings account, for your taxes. Awesome. Yeah. And that's the thing that we talk about a lot, is that so many people, when they hear taxes, they think of January, February, March, or April. And the problem with that is that it's too late for the majority of tax strategies that we might want to implement. Majority of them have to be done throughout the year. And so it's too late at that time. And so, a lot of times people say, well, let's do some tax planning, or they come to me in April, we're filing a return and say, here is the tax bill. And they're like, well, what about that strategy you talked about? And we're like, well, that's something we can do this year moving forward, but some of those things had to be implemented. So I think that's so big, especially when we're talking about the amount due. And what we see a lot in that situation is, especially for first-time business owners, they'll get that first bill and it's going to be their eyes open up. They're like, holy cow, like I didn't realize I need to be saving taxes. And after that, now they know moving forward, okay, now I need to think about this a little bit deeper. But the problem with that is that they're always catching up on that first year in business. Yeah. So every year they have a big tax bill that they're now on an installment plan. And it just seems like the tax bills just seem to kind of snowball effect because they can never really get caught up from that first year of being in business.
Yeah.
So what's kind of the kind of single best piece of advice that you give to entrepreneurs and individuals like that to avoid this type of mistake?
Start early. Like you just said, the tax game is not played in March or April of the following year. It's played from January of the first, or whatever the first, whenever you first start making money, whether it's January or it's a fiscal year that you're running, that's when this game is starting. And like you said, tax planning is there's got to be some planning involved. There has to be some time involved there to actually create a plan and then execute it over the year. So definitely starting early. Again, another sort of more practical piece is as you earn money to create having distinct accounts is so huge in avoiding some of these massive bills. And, I remember I was speaking with a fighter who he had, I think, a little over 50 grand sitting in a savings account that was used for everything. So, he had money there for like an emergency fund. He had money in there that he knew he was going to have some sort of tax bill, didn't know what it was going to be. He had money in there for, for expenses for his kids. Like, just everything was all there together. And you can easily dip into the amount of money that you're going to need for taxes if it's not separated out into a separate account. Mm-hmm. So yeah, having separate accounts for it, starting early, those are a couple of the biggest things that you could do.
Awesome. Now, as a financial coach, kind of what you do is help entrepreneurs build those kind of strong financial habits. So when you're talking about that, what are some of the best habits that you talk to entrepreneurs about implementing to reduce their taxes and stay on top of them?
Yeah, paying attention to your money is a sort of vague saying that I heard a while back over and over. And I've come to understand it a bit differently now, because when you can see your entire financial system, your entire financial situation with a bird's eye view, the taxes that you owe or that you're incurring are just a part of that. But the bigger picture here is really understanding your whole financial situation, and really what that entails is a complete list of your assets, the value of those assets, your liabilities, what the interest rate is on all those liabilities, what your payment is on them, what the outstanding balance is, your expenses, which I like to break down into fixed or recurring expenses, non-recurring needs, and your wants. And so that's just three sort of categories of expenses. And if you can break it down in that way, track your income as well. Just do you have an understanding of how much money you're making and how often, and your goals? What are you actually working towards? And do you have clear numbers that you're trying to reach? Is it a lifestyle that you're aspiring to? Having all that together is going to make setting aside those taxes a lot easier, because, for example, I'll work with someone who is afraid to set aside taxes because they're trying to use that money to pay for something else. When in reality, maybe it was because they overspent in the previous month way too much on things that they really didn't need. So all in all, you probably could sort of really nail your taxes and make the best of them, sort of in an isolated way. But I think that the better way is to do it with a holistic approach.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And, I think sometimes when business owners think about taxes, they don't understand that, the U.S. is a pay-as-you-go system. So technically taxes are due when you earn it. And so that's why when you see people that are on a W-2 type salary income, there's money taken out of every single paycheck, because your employer is essentially paying those taxes for you. They're paying those taxes on your behalf. But entrepreneurs, you are the employer. And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs think, well, it's a hard shift in this mindset of understanding that this income that I'm making is all pre-tax. And I think so many people think that it's automatically just after-tax dollars that they're receiving. And that's kind of the idea of how do I shift that mindset? And I think the key thing is having a good picture of where you're at. And also when you're making money, when you're receiving money, knowing right off the bat that a portion of that has to go away to taxes.
Yeah.
I'm always kind of on the idea of let's be conservative. Let's put more away for taxes. And hey, if at the end of the year, we did some really good tax planning, we saved a ton of taxes, and at the end of the year, you have an extra chunk of cash sitting there that does not have to be sent to any government agencies, well, that's just kind of a win for you. But I think it's the key thing is understanding, okay, what are your goals are? What do you need to live on? And then anything over that, let's try to see how can we save enough for taxes. Is that something that you kind of see with some of your clientele as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, the point that you make especially when people start off as employees, right? And then they try and start their own business, they have the habits of an employee. And you're exactly right. They treat their now new business in the same way that they did as an employee. And so it's just, they're not used to on their own, setting aside these taxes, and then it just, completely goes awry. So I think that is a big distinction. It's a mindset shift and a habit shift for sure from the employee mindset to the business owner or entrepreneur mindset.
Yeah. And just as you're saying that, it just makes so much sense to me, because very rarely will you have an entrepreneur that's been an entrepreneur their entire life, never worked a job, anything like that. Usually you're working a W-2, find an opportunity to go out on your own, do something else, or you're slowly starting to go out on your own, eventually make it full time. And so, yeah, that's a good point of that habit piece, that you're used to being an employer. You're used to saying, hey, I got my paycheck in the bank account today. That's all mine, because you don't realize what has been done prior to that check hitting your account. Right. So that's a good point. Now, what are some strategies or ideas that you've had or things that have helped people get through that habit change? So going from a W-2 employee to an employer in understanding kind of what that conflict is going to be on funds and money being pre-tax dollars.
Yeah, I think if you can think about it less as a chore and more as something that's really exciting. Like when you think about the fact that there's this line from Tom Wheelwright, Tax-Free Wealth, where he says the tax code is a treasure map. And that is a different mindset. It's a different way to look at taxes and as a business owner, in that this is exciting now all of a sudden, where if I can be smart about the way I make money and the way that I invest, I can actually, now you're playing a game here where you're actually potentially significantly reducing your taxes in a way that, well, if it's a treasure map, you're trying to uncover these different sort of strategies and then eventually, hopefully paying significantly less in taxes. But I think people get caught up in feeling like it's a chore, especially if they're not sort of math or number oriented and feeling like, oh, I don't even want to touch this. I don't want to look at it. Mike, please do all of this for me and let me know, what I can do. But yeah, having some excitement involved, like this is your money, this is your livelihood, and you can make a heck of a lot more and probably pay a heck of a lot less in taxes. Yeah.
I oftentimes tell people to think of it kind of like how a churchgoer would think of a tithe. Basically, that mindset is the first 10% of anything I earn is not mine. That goes to the church or to God in that scenario. And I think that once you kind of have that mindset, it's also, you can easily replicate that by saying, okay, and if it's a percentage, whatever number you come up with, but saying that first X amount of my dollars is not mine. That's something I need to put aside. And like you said, as we look at tax plans, we look at tax strategies, and that's why people are listening here, is that we want to get this idea of there's so much opportunities for tax planning out there. And that's what we're trying to make them aware of on this podcast. So you might put way more money away for savings than you actually need for taxes if you're implementing strategies that you want to. But ultimately, it's kind of getting to that understanding of what that is. We get so many clients that come in and they put money away, and then they just think, well, I don't need a tax plan because I got that money put away. And so I think that's another habit switch that we need to change, in saying, just because now you've put this money away, it's out of the picture, and you're just like, well, that's going to be taxes that are already out the door. Maybe if I didn't pay them yet, but it's going to be out the door. I guess I don't really need to do tax planning. And I think that's where you kind of go on the other side of it and say, okay, let's see what we can do. Let's see what strategies we can implement to claw back some of that money we did put away. And now you get a nice paycheck at the end of the year that you don't have to pay taxes on, because that's money that you just put away for taxes. So that's why I've always encouraged business owners to be conservative, but know and be willing to be hard at looking at tax strategies to see how much of that money, when we are being conservative, we can claw back and put right back into our pockets.
Yeah, that's a really neat point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, if you are on the other side of it, if you are being really good and setting your money aside, I can see how like you said, you might not feel like you need to do tax planning because that money is already there. But if you can pay a whole lot less, even a little bit less, you would, if someone offered you $5, you'd take it, so, it doesn't have to be such a substantial amount. It's just, any amount less for sure. But of course, with good tax planning, it can be a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, so you talked about kind of as you were transitioning, trying to find out, okay, where am I going to go with my career? What are we going to do there? You talked about doing a lot of different side hustles and starting a small business and things like that. So, what are some of when you're working with people, what are some encouragement that you can give on having people invest in themselves where they are able to start that small business, to start that side hustle that maybe they always want to do or plan to do in the future? What are some kind of tips that you have for that?
Yeah. The first is thinking about using money specifically for that purpose. So in the same way you'd think about, okay, I need a certain amount of money for food or a certain amount of money for my taxes or for my rent. Think about, I need a certain amount of money to invest in myself, because the investment that you make in yourself, and this used to confuse me too. Well, like, what does it even mean to invest in yourself? But nowadays I think about it as primarily your ability to earn more income. So when it comes to side hustles, gosh, now you can, I feel like this really exploded over this last couple of years since COVID hit. And now people are becoming more mindful to just the idea that they can make money from their laptops. When I started working, none of my jobs were from I had 5 different gig jobs. None of them were from behind my laptop. I was teaching after school financial literacy classes, like in classrooms. I was tutoring a high school student, babysitting. I was driving for Lyft and Uber, and I was picking up all these random tasks on an app called TaskRabbit. At that time, I was vaguely aware that you could do different sort of side hustles online. But and I'm sure Upwork and Fiverr were around, but for whatever the reason, when I was online looking for those things, it didn't really, I don't know. Maybe I didn't feel like I had marketable skills or something, but it just, nowadays, those are huge. Upwork, Fiverr, FreeUp. You can take a look at some of the most, some of the best jobs that you can, freelance jobs you can do on there. And even if it's an extra, few $100s a week, that could be your rent. That could be your food for the month. That could be an extra, 500. That could be an extra share of, an S&P 500 ETF for the month. And as far as investing in yourself goes, once you've identified something that maybe you want to learn, maybe it's animation, and you see there's a course online. There's so many courses online. Invest $150 in yourself and pull it from a savings account that is there specifically for that purpose. Don't pull it from a savings account that you're like, well, this is my emergency fund and I should only be using this money if I really need it. You're not going to invest in yourself if you're pulling money out of that account for that purpose. You're going to think, if all hell breaks loose, I need money. If my car breaks down, that's what I'm going to use that money for. So it's super important to set money aside in a separate account for that purpose. And then it makes it a lot easier to identify opportunities to invest in yourself.
Yeah. And I would also say that's not necessarily just for business owners either, that whole investing with yourself idea. That could be for somebody that says, how do I advance myself in my career? Maybe I'm young and I'm in a business or I'm an employee somewhere and I want to make leadership more quickly and I'm at a young age. So how do I kind of invest in myself to show my proof, show my worth that I can, I know what I'm doing and I'm able to kind of take that position. So think of it that way. It doesn't necessarily have to be a business owner. Yeah. That doesn't necessarily have to be a side hustle, although that's probably generally going to be your best opportunity for some of that freedom. But investing in yourself is something that you should be doing at all levels, whether you're a W-2 employee, whether you're unemployed, or whether you have the best job in the world. There's still going to be some investing in yourself that can be done.
Yeah. And that also reminds me, that's a great point, because I've got a friend, she has been working just a regular job and now she's trying to make a career change. And I had told her years ago to start putting money aside into this wealth account. And now she has thousands set aside in this wealth account to just start investing in herself so she can get she's still looking to be an employee, but an employee in a job that's way more fulfilling with less hours and more pay. So that's a great point. Yeah, that you don't have to be a business owner or an entrepreneur. You can be an employee and you should be investing in yourself regardless of which one you are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, this has been extremely helpful, and I think our listeners are really going to enjoy the content and what we've discussed today. If anyone wants to reach out to you, learn more about kind of what you're doing, where can they reach you?
Yeah. Easiest way is to just shoot me a text, 240-630-0568. You can check out my website as well if you'd like, chrisallenhanna.com. It's the same on Instagram, and that's about all I'm really active on is Instagram. That's where you can reach me.
Okay, excellent. We'll put some of those in the show notes and go from there. So, Chris, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast and taking the time today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, it was great to be here, and I wish you all the best as well.
This has been another episode of the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast from the team at Jetro. If you enjoy our weekly episodes, please leave a review on whatever platform you listen to us on and share with other business owners. If you have any questions or future topics you want to hear, email them to tax@jetrotax.com. Thanks for listening and have a great day.